We're back again. We're going to continue our discussions on the founding of the English colonies. We talked about the arrival of the Spanish, the Dutch, and the French. Look how the English started organizing. And because the founding of the United States government came from a break with England, we're going to be concentrating very closely on the development of the English colonies. But territories that would become the United States, there were other nations who were making significant advances, making significant developments in their territories. Talking about Jamestown, the first permanent English colony, 1607, founded in the General Assembly of Virginia. The Plymouth colony in 1620, talking about William Bradford and his efforts. The Massachusetts Bay colony in 1630, John Winthrop. The Maryland colony, the Rhode Island colony, Roger Williams. Pennsylvania, with William Penn. Georgia, the last of the English colonies to be founded, 1732. Oh, about the economics of the colonies, mercantilism, the Navigation Acts. I'll talk about the Glorious Revolution of 1688 and John Locke, the philosopher. Any questions on those? Now, we talked about the Roanoke colony and the very bizarre mystery of their disappearance. But the English weren't going to give up. So there's a lot of prime real estate here, a lot of valuable opportunities. They have an anxious population and looking for an outlet to expand their authority and commerce. So they're not just giving up so easily. Remember, England is in the middle of a Protestant Reformation at this point. You have Catholics and Protestants bitterly clashing against which religion is going to be the dominant or official religion of England. You've had countries in Europe have fought horrible civil wars over this question. They're going to be Catholic, they're going to be Protestants. Back in Ireland, they were still having these vicious battles into the 1990s. Catholics versus Protestants. The irony is, in a religion, the primary tenet is love thy neighbor.
Okay.
You don't see very much.
No,
That's
it's
sure.
one lesson that quite been carried out yet. This minister once told me a story of this other guy he knew said, first sermon, first day of the church, he said, sermon, love. Next Sunday, announcement was sermon, love. 20 years later, still the same thing, sermon, love. That's why I asked about this. I said, why are you doing this? I said, I haven't gotten it yet.
And they never will.
Who knows? Food for thought. Anyway, the Roanoke colony established on the outer banks of North Carolina. Kind of outer islands here. Kind of barrier islands here on the coast. And the colony just disappeared, but the temperate climate, mid-latitude, so the next trial is going to be here at Jamestown, 1607. It takes a lot of money to try to organize these things, a lot of effort to organize it, and the disappearance of 117 people, yeah, the work on that did get out, so that's not helping sales very much. Yeah.
Who led that settlement?
Jamestown,
Yes.
oh shoot, is a conglomeration. It was this corporate colony.
Yeah, I thought it was Captain John Smith who led people in Jamestown.
John Smith was working for the English Army, basically as a protection, hired bodyguard. A lot of these colonies, they did have protection from the Army or Navy. It's why you got a charter from the Crown for these colonies, so you would get that protection. That's explain. I just wondering out there in the middle of nowhere. Remember, England's having populations growing, not a lot of land available. Still, most of the people are farmers. And between all the strife and the intense poverty, there's not a lot of opportunities left in England. It's a very stratified, very strict class-based society. So you have these inherited titles, nobility. You're born poor, you're going to die poor. You're born rich, you're going to die rich. Born in between, you're going to die in between. There's no upward mobility. So the chance to start over with a new life, that's something that's very appealing for a lot of people. So a little adventure, fresh start. So in 1607, Jamestown's founded, named after King James I of England. It was founded in Virginia, just off Chesapeake Bay area. A lot of good natural ports, good lands nearby. The whole area itself is called Virginia, after James's predecessor, Queen Elizabeth I.
Why after Elizabeth, sir?
It was in honor of her. Elizabeth was a very popular queen. Like I said, very strong-willed, very determined woman. People liked her. She was willing to stand, even though England was still a very weak power at that point, Elizabeth was willing to stand up to the strongest powers in Europe on behalf of England.
Did they pick the name because she was known as the Virgin Queen?
Exactly, Virgin Queen. She was called that because she never got married. She realized very early that if she were ever to get married, all the power she had as queen would go to her husband, who would be king, and she would have nothing. I said, I'd rather be a married peasant than an unmarried peasant than a married queen. And so basically, she decided, I'm going to be married to England, married to my official duties as queen. So she's beloved for that. Very effective monarch. Whether she was a virgin, well, we're just not going to go there. She had a few boyfriends here and there, but we're not going to go there.
Let's just continue.
A problem with Jamestown, though, kind of a low, swampy area, subject to malaria, and the local tribes weren't too hospitable. There's a lot of disputes over lands, and so a lot of clashes and attacks. Now, the 104 colonists arrived in the first wave. Half of them were dead by the next January. It's exposure, malnutrition, constant attacks just wore them down. Wave after wave of colonists came in and failed to make the colony thrive. But it kept going. This was the first permanent colony. In fact, it's still there today. It's mostly tourist trap. They do a bunch of reenactments of people lived in colonial times, but this is the first one here. They kept going. They expanded upward, going up the James River. So in 1610, the city of Henrico was founded, named after Henry VIII, Queen Elizabeth's father. Henrico is later renamed Richmond. It's the present-day capital of Virginia. Well, by this time, they had the basic subsistence of life going. They could farm fairly well. Had a man named John Rolfe by 1612 started experimenting with tobacco. Proved to be a major cash crop. Except very popular in Europe. People wanted to smoke it, and so they wanted to sell it. So no, they didn't have any idea about the health effects of it, lung cancer, emphysema, or whatever, heart attacks and everything else. But
it wasn't produced like it is now. It was much cleaner.
Not clear.
Right.
Didn't have the chemicals, but still, a serious problem. The Surgeon General's report on the dangers of smoking wouldn't come out for another 350 years. So.
That's Henrico. Is that right?
Henrico is the city of, we're all kind of in that general area, along Virginia. The eastern part of Virginia called the Tidelands area. Eastern Virginia would be the richest and most prosperous plantations would be founded and developed. Well, in 1616, they're exporting tobacco, and Virginia's making a ton of money off of this. But the thing about tobacco is it's one of those crops that's very labor intensive. Actually, it needs almost a constant workforce through the entire process, from the planting for the growing season. It has to be constantly weeded, get the weeds out, make sure the tobacco plants themselves get enough sunlight and nutrition.
Don't get choked.
Yeah, exactly. Then it has to be harvested, which is a very labor-intensive process. And then you had to hang the leaves out to dry out, process tobacco, ship it off. So it's not like something, say, like wheat or corn, where basically, by comparison, it's just plant it, watch it grow. Basically, your most intense labor periods are always the planting process, the harvesting process, relatively low maintenance in between. Now, it's very high maintenance at all steps. So what's that mean?
Need laborers.
You need laborers. A large labor force, especially since you're making a ton of money off of this. But you're in Virginia in the summertime. Like I said, very, very hot in Virginia, and you don't have air conditioning yet. Basically, you don't want to do all that work yourself. So it means you need a labor force. It's not going to cost you very much, and one you don't have to care about very much. That's what I'm talking about here.
Slaves.
Slavery. See, when faced with problems, you can come up with all sorts of solutions, but you have to ask yourself the next logical question. Okay, I have this problem and I try this solution. What happens because of this solution? What happens next? What happens because I do this? This may solve problem A, labor shortage, but it can cause problems B, C, D because of it. And that's the problem that's going to end up happening in the South is, okay, they solve the problem of labor shortage, but and have a whole other series of problems. Holding millions of people against their will, forcing them to work. Like I say, we live in a society today where there isn't especially a lot of critical thinking on serious issues. Have some guy screaming on the radio about the solution to some problem. Okay, these guys are criticizing us. Let's bomb them to oblivion. Okay, let's ask that question. Okay, let's say there are protests of us in, let's say, Syria. People screaming about us, burning the American flag, the works. So a guy says, okay, they don't like us. Let's bomb them. Now, you'll hear things like that all the time. Let's completely obliterate them. Okay, problem. People are criticizing us. So what are your potential answers here? 1, ignore it. 2, respond politely. 3, kill every one of them. Okay, what happens if you decide to kill every one of them? Have you solved the problem of criticizing? Well, they'll not be doing much of anything anymore if they're all dead. But what happens because of that? Well, you have lots of innocent people dead who didn't say anything, because bombing campaigns, there's always what they call collateral damage. Innocent people are always hurt in those things. So what happens is other people are going to notice you did that. So are they going to be thanking America for doing that, or are they going to be very critical of America for doing that?
Goodness, they were talking about them too.
Even then,
Yeah, they
So
don't care then.
you killed a bunch of women and children because they were criticizing you.
I should have moved.
Yeah.
I mean, look here, we didn't care back then. I mean,
But again, you may solve one problem meantime, but you create a whole series of other problems. The other people all over the Middle East may suddenly start erupting in protest against the United States. There may have been only a few before, now there are millions. And you have people in other countries, allied countries, thinking, you know, maybe you overreacted a little bit. And suppose you start bombing all the other people who are criticizing you.
Then we start World War III.
Exactly. Yeah, maybe hundreds of millions dead. May not be a lot of people left criticizing you, but your own country may be in ruins from all the fallout from other countries deciding they're going to bomb you too. So the question, what are the initial, what happened because of your initial solution? You just made the problem worse.
Mm-hmm. You need to find a solution that has the least amount of problems that aren't as significant.
And you have to think, what is the next logical question? What happens because what happens if I engage in, what happens if I use this solution? What happens if I use this answer? And the next logical question. Because remember, the world isn't always, answers in the world are not always very simple. It does require some thought. So Rolf here has his problem. So making a lot of money off tobacco, wants to make more money, but needs somebody to do the work for him. And so he could pay people to bring people over from England, pay them to do the work, but that's going to cost a lot of money. It's going to cut into his profit margins. What if he doesn't have to pay them? So 1619, a Dutch ship drops off 20 slaves in Virginia, and slavery begins in Virginia. Disposable workforce that they didn't have to care about.
Yeah, weren't the slaves also used to run plantations as well?
Oh, yeah, there are all sorts of uses for slaves. If we're getting as much more detail as the institution develops, there's some used just for manual labor. There's some used very skillfully. Some used actually to run shops owned by their owners. Some used as domestic servants. There's some positions of some respect in the household. Yeah.
But not all slaves were treated badly, as everybody thinks, right?
Now, there were varying degrees of how they were treated. There were some who were beaten and raped every day.
Right.
There were some who were murdered. They could get away with that. There were some treated like respected members of the family.
Right. But you still don't turn a deaf ear because of that. That's only a few. Because it's just the point, again, it's the term slavery. So it's not the fact of how they were treated, but it was just the fact of the issue that it was slavery. So because, like I said, it's not everybody was beaten, but they were still held and sold into slavery. So
Yeah, great differences in how they're
right. So
treated.
don't look at that twisted. Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Fact is, they're being held against their will. They cannot simply come and go as they please.
Right.
They cannot marry as they please. They cannot raise their own children as they please. They cannot live their life as they see fit. They can't go to school. They can't learn to read. All the things you've taken for granted your whole life, slaves can't do. They're living there their whole lives doing what someone else tells them to do. They may be physically treated well, they're always living with that fact. Of course, there are others that are complete nightmares, but eventually slavery is going to be legal in every English colony.
Kind of sounds like a proxy life.
In a lot of ways it is. It's just, you're stuck there. Your life is never really your own. That's the 1619, but also another important event happened in 1619. Creation of the General Assembly of Virginia. So at the church in Jamestown, the Anglican church, the General Assembly met. Assembly, Virginia is forming its own first elected government. They have a governor, 6 councilors, and 22 what called burgesses. And their lower house can be called the House of Burgesses. Meeting local church because that's the only place that's big enough to hold all of them. But with this, the American tradition of representative government began. These are all elected, but you had to be a male property owner over the age of 21 and Protestant to be able to vote. It's a limited vote, but this is the very beginning. These rights would expand and grow over time. Remember, what's happening here is they're taking the system they knew from England and bringing it over to the colonies. System of laws they worked, system of government they knew, they were used to it, they made it work, so they're transplanting that to Virginia. In England at this point, you had an elected parliament. Very few people could vote for it, only the upper classes, again, only male landowning Protestants over 21 but they had to own a lot of property. So only the upper classes could be able to vote. But it was the idea of representative government, an idea that was already 300 years old in England. That was brought in the idea of due process of law, which was already 400 years old in England. A system that worked for them, and they brought it over to the Americans. As you can see, it's going to happen, say, the Spanish and the French colonies. The French are going to be bringing over French law and traditions. The Spanish will be over Spanish law and Spanish traditions. They sort of taking what they knew and using it to set up their organization, their communities. Although it's not the type of system we're used to today in the 21st century, this is the beginning. So who can vote will expand over time. The rights as we know them today will evolve and expand over time. So this is the very humble beginning. Now, 1620, the next year, Plymouth Colonies founded. A group led by William Bradford, essentially a group of religious refugees, called pilgrims.
Okay.
Or pilgrim simply means someone who is taking a voyage for religious purposes.
Like prosecutions?
Yeah, they're facing some persecutions in England. Like I said, pilgrimage basically be you're going to church on Sunday. That could be a pilgrimage. This is a lot more intense. 2-week voyage in a rickety little boat across the Atlantic on the Mayflower. 101 of them, they were Puritans. It's kind of the extreme end of Protestant. They're Protestants, but they've broken with the Church of England, which is the official Protestant church.
I'm sorry, sir. You said 101 of the pilgrims were Puritans?
101, all of them, and these pilgrims are all Puritans. Except the Church of England, also called the Anglican Church, was the official Church of England. It's Protestant. They've broken with the Roman Catholic Church going all the way back to Henry VIII when breaking with the Catholic Church because the Pope wouldn't let him divorce his wife. Except, I think the most noble reason to start a church, but it started nevertheless. Well, Henry VIII had organized the Church of England, and he actually had been a very devout Catholic, so the organization of the church originally was very close to the Catholic Church. In fact, even today, there's still a lot of very close similarities to the Church of England and the Roman Catholic Church in structure and form of worship. Well, the Puritans think that the church was still too Catholic in its influences. It needed to be purified and rid of its Catholic ideology. Basically, thought the Catholic Church strayed too far from the Bible, and the Puritans were going to set it right the way the church was supposed to be run. But you have to understand, in England, there was no separation of church and state. They were one and the same. The king is the head of the church. The church is the state. The state defends the church. And if you want to stay in the king's good graces, you're going to be a good Anglican. So if you criticize the church, you are also criticizing the king. And if you criticize the king, if you're criticizing the state, criticizing God, you are in deep, deep trouble. This problem here, the Puritans are criticizing the king and his church. So, they faced a lot of persecution in England, a lot of very uncomfortable questioning from officials. A lot of cases they had property seized, schools shut down. So eventually they went to Holland for a while, because in Holland they had freedom of religion there. First countries in the world really to have it. Now England, as many problems they had, that was actually considered a free country for that time period. A lot freer than a lot of other parts of the world, but Holland, even freer. They could live the way they wanted to. But the problem is when they got to Holland, though, find very different culture, different language, and these Puritans just didn't like some of the influences their communities followed. It was a little too free. So they decide they're going to go to America, back under English authority. So Bradford's leading them along the way of the Mayflower. Well, the original course is Virginia. They get blown off course and land
Cape Cod.
Cape Cod, yeah. An area they end up calling Plymouth. This is 1620. Story about Plymouth Rock. They didn't. It wasn't quite the same area they landed at, but it became a landmark nevertheless. But notice one of the most famous groups of colonists to emerge, the Pilgrims. Lots happened already in the English colonies. You ever saw that movie Malcolm X, where Denzel Washington's Malcolm X giving that famous speech? We didn't land at Plymouth Rock. Plymouth Rock landed on us. There's a lot of truth in that. By the time the Pilgrims landed, two defining institutions of early American history were already in place. The General Assembly of Virginia, with the idea of elected representative government, and slavery. Those were already in place by the time the Pilgrims arrived. Well, in November 1620, they signed the Mayflower Compact. Some statement which the people of the community agreed they would abide by the laws their leaders set up.
Sorry, no, November in the same year?
Yeah, November 1620. They landed late summer, early fall. But they realized they were outside English authority. They realized until English authorities come by, because they were on their own. So they decided they're going to establish their own community first. This agreement they're going to set up this community in a certain way, and the people are going to follow these laws. Essentially, they're here to try to start over society. On their own Puritan image, creating a Puritan community, they can live life on their own terms. They're not looking for freedom of religion on an individual basis, looking for it on a community basis. They see themselves as a group, compact, working together. They encountered friendly tribe natives in the area, learned to cultivate corn by the spring of 1621, and celebrated their good fortune with the Thanksgiving celebration that autumn, inviting the local tribes over. There was a Thanksgiving celebration in the El Paso area about that same time. A group of people giving thanks to God for their own good fortune that year. But the one that's generally celebrated in the United States comes from that first celebration in 1621. And while they were friendly with the neighboring tribes, those friendly relations did not last too long, unfortunately. The first Thanksgiving, it wasn't the traditional Thanksgiving you think of today. They had a lot of fish, seal, squirrel.
Okay.
Like I said, ate a lot of the little woodland creatures around the area, indigenous corn and whatnot. But the official observance of Thanksgiving is the fourth Thursday in November. That was established in the Civil War. Now, Plymouth itself, the population remained small. Never got above 7,000. And was absorbed by Massachusetts in 1691. But you get to the Bay Colony, 1630. Massachusetts found in 1630 as a haven for religiously persecuted. But again, they're wanting to establish their own religious community. Next, be any religion you want, people live in their community, you've got to be Puritan. Otherwise they'll kick you out. Leader of this group was John Winthrop, a devout Puritan himself. He hoped to build a utopian community, free from the corruption and anguish of the old world. Built what he foresaw was what he called a shining city on a hill, an example of religious faith and devotion for the whole world fallen. Boston is founded that same year. By the end of the year, has more than 1,000 residents. Boston is a very, very old city. Massachusetts has come to dominate that whole region. It became called New England. A little further south, Maryland. Founded by Sir George Calvert. This is a colony for Roman Catholics. So a large number of Catholics in England.
It was founded in when?
1636. It's named after Queen Mary I. She was another daughter of Henry VIII, older sister to Queen Elizabeth. She was a devout Roman Catholic. Trying to restore Catholicism in England. Yeah.
You said sister to Queen Elizabeth?
Yeah, elder sister.
As in, what you mean by the Queen Mary? As in Bloody Mary?
That's where she got the nickname from. She got from the persecution of Protestants. About 300 are burned at the stake, but Elizabeth actually slaughtered more Catholics. But Mary actually had a very interesting, very tragic life. She was always kind of pushed in, kind of caught in the shadow between her father and her sister. Life was never really her own. But tried to restore Catholicism in England, but had a lot of trouble because the Church of England was already so well entrenched. But it's going to be a haven for English Catholics. The first community in Maryland is going to be St. Mary's, which was a native village, already with cleared fields, wooden cabins, basically just ready for people to move in. The Calvert and his associates bought it from the local tribe, and then folks moved in. Very shortly afterward, a legislative assembly is set up. Even though it's nominally Catholic, there are a lot of Protestants moving into the area, which leading to some problems in Maryland itself. And unfortunately, though, we're not going to have time to talk about what happens in Rhode Island. Massachusetts is going to splinter over a lot of religious issues. We'll talk about Rhode Island, Pennsylvania, all the others next time on Monday. Read chapters 2 and 3 in your book. If there are no questions, see you later.